So now he's recording. We're no longer allowed to say anything nasty about Manchester.
Yeah, and if you don't want to be on video, just turn your video off.
Yeah, for anybody that was in at the very start of the informal chat that we were having when people were joining. First of all, welcome to the Friday Charm session. This is the last of the UK Inspiration events of this week. We have started the week with a session on Monday which focused on retrofit and the fantastic work Crampton and Paris Habitat are doing around developing a circular economy in housing and how they are addressing the issues of circularity in housing. Then on Tuesday, we had a session with ourselves, Accord Housing Association, looking at the development of a virtually plastic-free home as part of our contribution to a circular housing economy. And we also had Wunbredreif, who are a wonderful housing organisation in Eindhoven, talking about how they are addressing similar problems of circularity in housing, but from a very different perspective and a very different set of solutions. And it's been great working with them to try and address the issues that we've been having over the last 12 months as we've been designing this scheme up and out. Yes, then on Wednesday we had a session on the social impact of circularity in housing and circularity. Who does it benefit? Is it the tenants? Is it the housing organisation? Is it the planet? Or is it the bottom line of corporate organisations? And that was a more academic discussion with people from Birmingham University, from TU Delft, and was really interesting on Wednesday. Yesterday, we supported the Alliance for Building Sustainable Products, Dragon's Den, looking at how we can take plastic packaging out of the construction industry. And then in the afternoon, we had the turf cutting, the ceremonial starting on site of the first 12 virtually plastic-free homes, which we think is not just in the UK, but the first 12 in Europe as well as a whole. And then today, we are looking at the role of the factory in delivering those 12 virtually plastic-free homes. This, as we said, was meant to be the UK's Inspiration Day as part of that Charm product, as part of that Charm project. And so we would have started the day, had we been there, with a factory tour. And clearly, because of COVID, we were unable to all meet in present together. There are far too many people on this call to comply with the COVID regulations that have been recently introduced in the UK. So we made the correct decision to turn it into a virtual event. But we would have started with a factory, and we would have started with a factory tour. To give you some background, because some of you from Europe might think, what on earth is a housing association in the West Midlands doing, having a timber frame factory? I think there are a number of answers to that, really. And it's a journey that Accord Housing Association has gone on, which has led us to the point where we have both a timber frame factory, and we're now trying to innovate within that timber frame factory to produce a circular housing solution by removing plastic from the manufacturing process. The West Midlands has had a long and historic tradition of manufacturing. We were the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, and for many, many years we produced a good chunk of the world's cars. All of my family, when I was a child, worked in the car industry, working on production lines. And when we started to look 20 odd years ago, 15 years ago, at how we produced low carbon housing, we first of all started off some schemes where we put lots of green things onto a traditional housing development. And unfortunately, what we found with the approach of putting lots of green things onto a traditional house was that every time there was a problem with the budget, we took one of those green things off and we ended up with lots of really nice developments that weren't green. And so we thought we had to do something different, and we had to change the fabric of the way that we built. And we went to Scandinavia for some inspiration, and we found a fantastic low carbon building technology using closed panel timber frames, and we experimented it with some houses, and we found that our residents really liked them, that their fuel bills were 40% lower than they would be if we built traditionally, and we found that there was 4 times less embodied carbon in the building structure by building that way than there would have been otherwise. And also though, when we went and looked around what the Scandinavians were doing to build these homes, we discovered something that was fairly familiar to us in terms of a factory line that was the same sort of thing that my father and my uncle and my grandfather used to work on in the car industry. And we thought, we've got those skills here in the West Midlands to be able to make them work. Therefore, we went into developing our own factory as part of that process. In terms of the Charm project itself, though, we weren't satisfied with just keeping the product as it was in Scandinavia. We wanted to see if we could innovate and make it better and improve upon the fantastic work that Scandinavians had done for centuries around how they built houses. And from that, we've produced a number of anglicised models of that housing product, and now we are producing some virtually plastic-free homes in the factory. The reason why we went plastic-free, we discussed at length yesterday and on Wednesday and Tuesday. It's essentially the next step. We have, from the factory, worked out how to produce what Pete will call Eco 200 in terms of a product from the factory which can be zero carbon and can achieve zero carbon fairly easily. But we also realised that we were putting a lot of plastic into that house, and it wasn't a natural product. It wasn't good for the planet. It wasn't good for the environment. So having cracked the carbon issue, we wanted to see how we could further reduce our impact on the planet, and that bred the virtually plastic-free home. We now, I think, have the ability for the plastic-free home to be built in the, well, we do have the ability for the plastic-free home to be built in the factory. We obviously couldn't have you, as we wanted, all present, having a tour of the factory as the start of our inspiration day today. So we thought we would bring the factory tour to you virtually, and then afterwards we've got an opportunity with Pete, who's a technical manager at the factory, with myself, to answer any questions that you might have about our factory and how it works. Also, I'm sure if you want to buy some houses that come off the production line, we'd be very happy to sell you some. So Tom, do you want to run the video and we'll start the tour? You have to imagine that you're now turning up in the car park of our factory.
Yeah, you're turning up now. And okay, let me know if there are any audio issues or whatever.
Hello, welcome. My name is Michael Corliss and welcome to LoCal Homes. Let me show you around. So now we're in our factory in Aldridge in the West Midlands. Let me go and show you how we make them and distribute them throughout the UK. It all starts here. So here at the factory, this is where we receive the raw materials. One of the first things that we do is check for moisture content. There's 13 quality checks done on each panel. The first of all is the moisture content. You can see this particular batch is 13%. Anything above 20 gets automatically rejected. It's not machinable. Now that we've established the timbers that we can cut, the first point of the process is to process them through the CNC machine, computer numeric control machine. The CAD drawings, computer design, are loaded onto the machine, and our operatives take the raw timbers through and cut them to pre-described lengths. Now that we have the raw materials for this superstructure cut to perfect length, they're brought over here to the module section. This is where we make the window reveals and the door reveals. They become the key components to the panel. They then move further down the production line into the nail gun. That's where the panels are assembled, and we'll show the Moby 1 nail gun in action now. This is a phenomenal machine. This can use over 100 nails a minute into various different lengths of timber. The panels come along the production line to the butterfly machine. This is my favourite piece of kit. It flips the panel over to allow the engineers to work on the other side and the inside of the panel. We make everything in the factory, as I said before. These are what we call spandrel panels. These are the triangular panels that will typically go in the loft and divide two houses. So number 13 and number 15, for example. So here we're putting on the fireboard and we're insulating them for sound and the cross transference of heat. On the inside, you would have a traditional plastic board supported by 38mm service bands. Inside of that, you'll see the thermoreflective breathable membrane. This is being replaced by a plastic-friendly alternative. The infrastructure is an 198mm timber panel, insulated with high-density fireproof insulation, supported by a 12mm fire protection board and a breathable membrane. You'll see also the instrumescent strips. These will not be replaced by a plastic alternative, as there isn't one freely on the market. Then supported by a 38mm batten, insulated for damp, and the external elevation will be delivered by the client's choice. Here we have a cementitious board, which is fireproof, waterproof. It comes in various different colours. You can have brick slips, you can have render board, you can have untreated timber. The choice is endless. You've seen the factory panels being made, the spandrels being made, the machinery in full operation. Here we have the pallets for the house units ready to go to site. Behind me on these panels are whole house units ready to go. They're covered in this nasty plastic at the moment. This is a thing of the past. We're building a canopy at the back of the factory to store these, to keep them out of the weather while they're ready to go to site. What we have here on our bungalow, this is made up of our Eco 200 system. We're demonstrating here a brick slip and a hardy plank elevation option. The brick slip has a far better carbon footprint, has a lower embodied carbon value than a normal brick. Pulled together with the hardy plank, it dovetails very well. Options for the plastic-free house involve an Okoye untreated timber, which has an even better carbon effect. When you're inside one of our houses, what does it look like? Does it look any different? No, it doesn't look any different, but it feels different. It sounds different. It's warmer. It's quieter. It's far better for the environment, and it costs a lot less. Okay, you've been to Aldridge, Walsall in the West Midlands. You've been around the factory. You've seen how the panels are made, the spandrel panels are made. You've seen our processes, our finished houses. You've met the team. There's just one thing left to do: build some houses.
Okay. Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Pete, for that. What we've got now is the opportunity to ask any questions that anyone might have about the factory, about the tour. We think it'll take. We think there'll be lots and lots of questions, and we want to give you all the chances that you've got to ask anything that you would like about that. If you want to ask questions in the chat, we can pick them up from that. If you ask them to everyone, everyone can see them. There has been one question that came in already, which is, where is the timber from? I think the first thing to say on the timber is that it's all FSC certified, which means it's from sustainable sources from Scandinavia. We have to buy it from Scandinavia because of the density of the timber. Has to be a certain strength in order to be able to hold the house up. And in the UK, our timber isn't very good because we planted all of our forests to meet the needs that we thought there would be for newspapers rather than for construction. And so we get our timber from Scandinavia, essentially. It's Scandinavian pine that's been grown in the Arctic Circle, so it's grown slowly and therefore is much harder than the timber that we get at the moment. Is there anything else you would like to say on the subject of where we get our timber from, Pete? Hang on, let me just unmute you. You're not.
I got it.
That's it. Go on,
Yeah.
Pete.
Yeah, as you explained, it's all responsibly sourced from Scandinavia. It's purchased from there predominantly because it's fast grown, it stays straighter for longer once machined, and it gives the structural strength that's required for the panel.
Okay. What is the insulation made of? In our traditional products, we use glass wool for the insulator, and so we insulate the products with glass wool as the process. For the plastic free, because there's quite a bit of plastic in the in glass wool, we're not using glass wool. We are using Udifirm, which is timber.
Yeah, so it's a kind of wet processed pressed wood fibre. There's wood fibre boards, and there's we found quite a lot of insulations that seem to be more natural had plastic binders in them. So that's one area where we found difficulty. We mentioned yesterday as well that we looked at using mycelium, which has very good thermal conductivity levels, but it wasn't yet certified for use, and obviously we need it to make sure that it can be insured and pass building control, so we couldn't go forward with that. But we've got good wood fibre products in there. They're byproducts of the wood, of the timber industry, really.
Yeah, I mean, we as Tom said when we started, we anticipated using sheep's wool or mycelium as the insulated method for the plastic-free home, and we thought that was going to be the easiest decision that we ever had to make. But when we looked into the lamb's wool insulative product, we found there was quite a large amount of plastic that acts as a binder for the wool, and therefore it wasn't as natural as we anticipated, and we had to find an alternative insulator for that, and that Udifirm wet timber process is the insulative that we've come up for the plastic free. But for our low carbon houses, we would use glass wool. That's right, isn't it, Pete? That's
correct, Carl. Very much so. There's no more I could really add to that.
Okay. What is the production levels from both factories, i.e. how many homes a day? I think we can, at full capacity, produce 2 houses a day from the factory. Is that right, Pete?
Yes, we're currently producing 2 houses per day or 10 houses per week, but we're only currently optimising one of the production lines on a single shift. So we could man up effectively to utilise both production lines and produce 4 houses per day on a single shift within the current factory scope.
Can I say, is that from both factories? Because you've got 2 factories, haven't you now?
We've only got one. That's it's only the large new factory that we've got operational. I think that's.
Okay. I didn't know the other one's closed, isn't it?
Yes. That's right. Okay.
Yes. Yep. Yes, we're no longer using the other factory. That is going through decommissioning at the moment.
So for people that don't know, we started off with a relatively small factory that could make 400 homes a year, and we started that factory off. We found that the process was incredibly successful, but we hadn't got enough space in that smaller factory, so we've relocated the factory to a larger site. And for a transition period, we had the small factory that we'd already operated in operation, and we had the larger unit that was a new unit that was in operation just whilst we transitioned across. Okay. We've done the production levels. What is the unit cost of houses? That's $1 million question, I have to say, Lucy. What's the unit cost of houses? Whilst we could probably tell you a standard house type from our factory, what the cost of that is, what we can't tell you is the cost of the land and the specification of what you want to fit out inside that house in order to make it suitable for your own personal purposes, and those have a big bearing on the cost of a home, in terms of the land value, in terms of the doors, the windows, the kitchens, the bathrooms, etc., etc. The frame that we've got, depending on unit size, will vary from about £60,000 to about £80,000 a unit. But that won't tell you very much in terms of how much the end cost of the product will be and property will be, because you have to add in the land, you have to put in the groundworks, you have to put in the fitting out of that frame as well. Having said that, if the question is how does building a low carbon home from our factory compare with building traditionally in price, then at the moment we are slightly cheaper, so you get a more environmentally friendly home for less money than a traditionally built property. Is that right, Pete?
Yeah, I'd say that's right. Some of the feedback from the construction team would estimate that we are approximately 10 to 15% cheaper than traditional building overall cost on a standard house type.
Okay. What is the construction time on site? Well, that's a really good question as well. In a similar way, I could answer that by saying we have built 2 houses in one day in order to demonstrate the fast construction process that we've got from the factory. And there is actually footage that was on the news in the West Midlands of us doing that. Having said that, that's not a realistic timescale for you to plan and manage a site on, because whilst the frame goes up and you can get the property watertight in 24 hours, you still need to do all the groundworks. You still need to then kit out the house inside. We talk about trying to achieve a 12-week construction period. I work on the client side with an Accord, and we program for 12 weeks for the construction of each individual unit. In the factory, it's 1 day to build the house in the factory. And one of the significant advantages, I think, of building close panel timber frames is actually that it lowers the preliminary costs of having a site, what we call the prelim costs of having a site, the costs of having a site manager on site, the cost of having cabins on site, the cost of having security on a building site, because you can build them quicker. And one of the issues that we found doing this is the subcontract labour that we use to kit out the houses generally don't anticipate that. So we'll say we are bringing the frame next week, and our subcontract labourers then sort of plan for 6-7 weeks time to start kitting out the house rather than 1 week. And so we have to have a process of working with subcontract labourers to squeeze that build programme on site down as much as possible. But I think a 12 to 16 week construction period is plenty on site. I don't know what you would say on that, Pete?
Yeah, we have the capability, as demonstrated on the video, of building 2 houses in a day. But as you say, it's all of the internal finishing that then takes up the time. The next project we're looking at, we're scoping out to start and complete 4 houses per calendar week on site. So we're just looking now with the construction team at gearing up not only how to deliver that to site, but also what's required on site in order to be able to achieve that. Where most of our sites currently average around about 2 to 3 finished per week.
Okay. And the lifespan of houses. The lifespan of houses is a really good question. And I suppose we can't answer that definitively because none of the houses that we've built have ever come to the end of their lifespan yet. And when we went to Scandinavia and saw homes that were built using exactly the same method, we looked at houses that had been built in the 1800s. And so, in theory, the lifespan of these homes is as long as you want it to be, would be the answer of that. Depending on how you clad the outside of the house, there may be some maintenance elements that you're required to do that you wouldn't have on a traditional house. So in Scandinavia, where they use untreated pine a lot as their external cladding method, then they have to paint them every 5 or 10 years, depending on what the paint that they've used is. If you use cementitious board, then you don't have that issue. And if you use brick clad exteriors, you don't have that issue. And the lifespan is as long as you want it. It has the same ability in terms of the warranties and guarantees to get you exactly the same mortgage as you would have for a traditional house, and is assessed by the Council for Mortgage Lenders as having the same lifespan as a traditionally built house. I don't know if you want to add anything on that, Pete?
No, nothing to add there, Carl.
Okay. How many employees do you have doing the manual work, and do you fit windows and doors into the panels prior to delivery on site? On the fitting the windows and doors prior to delivery on site, that depends on the site and what the project is. We can and have and do that, and we can and have and haven't done that, depending on the arrangements with the contractor. But I think, Pete, you're probably better answering these questions than myself.
Yeah, I currently have 14 full-time employees on site, producing 10 houses per week in terms of the structural element.
Okay, and at the moment, are we putting windows and doors into the panels prior to delivery on site on the current job we're doing, or not?
Not on our current project. The 2 projects we're running at the minute are both Eco 100, so they're due to have a brick skin installed on site. But generally on some of the Eco 200s, we have that flexibility of whether the contractor wants them fitted within the factory or as a site fit element afterwards.
So just to explain the Eco 200 and the Eco 100 situation, if you're having a product that requires a brick skin on site, then you wouldn't be able to put windows and doors in because that brick skin would change it. And we also have, I suppose, a lesser environmentally friendly product in Eco 100. It still uses low carbon building techniques, but it gets you through British building regulations, where our Eco 200, which has a closed panel frame, which is craned onto site, exceeds building regulations in the UK by 20% better performance on its need for heating and thermal efficiency. And in that product, that's the better performing product, you can fit the windows and doors in the factory and have it craned whole in, whereas if you're putting a brick skin around the outside, you can't do that. What are the thermal performance levels of the panels? In terms of the thermal performance of the panels, the Eco 200 has a 0.18 performance level.
Yeah, that's the U value.
Sorry, U value. Let me just check the questions.
I think that's right. Yeah, Lester D'Souza asked that. What are the thermal performance levels? Yeah,
I was right. 0.18 is the U value in terms of the performance of the panels, of the walls in the panel.
I guess we should also, with that, Pete's mentioned about like putting brick slips on, and often it's specified by planners that we have to put brick slips, which are quite an expensive component on the outside of a panel. That kind of, yeah.
And they don't improve the thermal performance of the product either, because
Exactly, yeah.
they just keep the wind and water out, and they don't keep you warm. So that Eco 100 product that has the brick slips generally has a lower thermal performance than the 0.18 U value of the walls that we get from the Eco 200 product. The virtually plastic free house will have a better performance than 0.18 because of using the wooden board rather than the glass wool, and the 0.18 is our standard Eco 200 product, and you can improve upon that fairly easily with some taping in the construction process as well. Is there anything you'd want to add on thermal performance, Pete, that I haven't touched on there?
No, I think you know more about the thermal performance than I do, Carl.
Yeah, we can, the revised building regulations that will produce what the British government are calling virtually carbon-free homes, which weren't virtually carbon-free homes in our book. The Eco 200 product can achieve that without the need to supply any renewables to supplement its performance. Hopefully that helped. Hopefully that answers Lester's question. Yeah. Ricky?
It's about retrofit as well as new construction panels. Yeah, so at the moment we're working on panelised retrofit to externally clad some poor performing buildings in the Walsall local authority, which is nearby to the factory. And yeah, so we're working on that at the moment. That's another innovation project that we're working on. I'd say it's been quite challenging, hasn't it, in terms of you know, you're dealing with various different building techniques and trying to make sure that they can attach to those properties, those buildings has been a challenge, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been a challenge, and also the regulatory obstacles that we have in the UK have been much higher than we would have thought. What we consider to be fairly ghastly buildings with incredibly poor thermal performance, with a bit of brick and a bit of white render on, the planners see as beautiful buildings which need to keep all of that on the outside. And clearly, if you're going to wrap the building, you can't achieve that. And that gives us a real dilemma then, because if you can't improve the thermal efficiency of an old terraced street that we've got in the West Midlands, we either then have to dispose of that and it will go into the private rented sector and be and remain a poor performing house for a very, very long time and degenerate slowly in that community and be a problem for them, or we don't really know how we can improve them and regenerate that area apart from demolishing them, which is also not something that you'd want to do with those buildings. So I think that retrofit project that we've got asks lots of questions about how we approach the planning of retrofit and how much priority we put to keeping people warm in the planning process, and whether we really are putting people first. I think but yes, we do have a retrofit product as well.
Yeah, and I guess we also recognise that a lot of the external wall insulation that happens at the moment in the UK is only very thin, like 50mm stuff, which is not good enough and will need to be taken off and then reapplied thicker again. And so we're sort of putting plasters on the buildings that we're retrofitting at the moment. It's not deep enough. Pete is asking about cost of. Peter Hugerweg from EFL is asking about the cost of the panels, why they're lower. Is it because it's in production line instead of on site? Yes, basically. It's easier to control the working environment. You don't have so many issues with the weather, with the materials, and with workers basically having issues working in the environment on site. It's a more controlled environment, basically, isn't it? I guess the idea of the production line, people think about it in comparison to a car factory, which it has, Carl mentioned at the start, where some of his family used to work, and there's still car production skills in the West Midlands, and I know that some people have been taken from there and onto LoCal homes, and certainly the manufacturing skills, and a lot of the people in the factory are, you know, manufacturing skilled people. So yeah.
And also the mechanisation in the factory gives a quality assurance. So that nail gun that you saw in has an image of what the panel it has to be built in its computer memory, and it puts the nails in exactly the right place to exactly the right depth, with exactly the right strength to make sure the timber is as strong as it possibly can be. I don't know if you want to answer anything else on that, Pete.
In terms of the nailing and the frame manufacture, it's all being driven by the CAD drawing, the CAD design. It's not down to an operator. Quality control is there from the design point. The structural engineer says the panels need a 50mm nailing centre to achieve the racking strength. It's automatically fed into that machine and nailed at 50mm exactly. It takes all the operator error out and gives us the reliability to keep repeating that process over and over again in a manufacturing form.
So cost is part of the reason we do it in the factory, but quality is the other big reason that we do it in a factory. And also working conditions, really. I've been around lots of really, really muddy, horrible sites in the West Midlands where some poor chap is trying to saw a piece of wood to fit a kitchen in the rain outside. And in the factory, there's a much better working condition than that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anna Hope's asked about the size of the first and the second factory. So I think was the first about 200 homes a year. Is that
is she talking about square meterage size of the factory?
Go for that. Capacity? Yeah, go for either, both. Yeah.
I believe the first factory was only around about 50 square meters of footprint. Don't quote me on that. It was very small. We're now 6 times that size in terms of the actual footprint. So I believe we're around about 350 square meters of floor space. That's enabled us to put 2 production lines in, the ability to do a pod manufacturing line to install bathroom pods, and also a brick slip line. Another question popped up about storage. Yes, we do require quite a lot of external storage. As Mike alluded to within the video, we're currently, on the 12th of October this year, having a large canopy built over the whole of the backyard, because we're currently making it 10 houses per week, but unless we get multiple sites all taking at the same time, the site demand can fluctuate. So we need an ability to store some of them and hold them for the specific sites as their demand increases and falls depending on the weather conditions and the building constraints.
Hi Pete, thanks. It's Anna here. Just asked the question. I'm really sorry, but my sound dropped out just when you were saying the square meterage, which was the.
It's about 50 square meters in the first one, and then 350 in the new one. 50
square meters.
Of actual production line size, wasn't it? Or maybe it's a bit bigger than that. But it's basically increased in capacity about five times or something like that.
From 500 to 3,000, sorry.
Oh, 500. Yeah, I was thinking 50 square meters. It's smaller than the house.
It's also square foot, isn't it? Square foot, square meters, and
3,000.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wondered, just in addition to that, because what I'm working on in Bristol is working with a community group that wants to set up a kind of local production space for eco modular homes. But what is in terms of that kind of balance between the efficiency, the scale? Presumably, I mean, partly the reason you need to scale is because you've got a high demand because you're building for your own developments, and there's kind of a high demand throughput. But I'm just thinking in terms of the, what am I trying to say? there's an economy of scale, presumably, of having a bigger space where you can be building more homes. There's an economy of scale, presumably, in terms of that. Does that make it cheaper, having the larger space?
I think the magic figure that we worked on was you needed a sort of pipeline of 200 homes to make a factory work. And that was certainly the equation that we used in the first factory where we went smaller. What we found was that our product was really good, and we wanted to do more of it, which is why we went to the bigger factory. And also we've got an expertise, I suppose, around doing factories, which I'm sure we would be happy to share with you and talk with you through, because I know we've developed this concept of we've never done it yet, but a sort of factory in a box, so you can use our skills and our management approach and our operation procedures to deliver something. But generally speaking, to make the factory viable, you want a sort of throughput of around 200 homes a year, which is not a lot for a city the size of Bristol.
No, absolutely. That's great. Thanks very much.
Oh,
cool. Construction period on site, you've talked about that, I think.
Yeah, we plan for 16 weeks really as the construction period of a house. It can be accelerated much quicker than that, or depending on what you're doing, can be different.
Yeah.
One of the savings though is a shorter period on time, because rather than having somebody turn up every day with a delivery of sand and a delivery of cement and a delivery of water, you get one panel that can be craned onto site, and so it makes for a much quicker and cleaner site as well.
Cool. There's a question about, have you considered volumetric modular construction instead of panels? Thomas, do you want to explain that a bit? Do you mean basically putting the whole room together at the same time, for example? Or does anyone else know that phrase? We can
I know the phrase, yeah.
You know the phrase, cool.
Yeah. Did Thomas want to say anything before I
think he is walking around, I'm not sure whether he's...
Okay, don't worry, I'll answer. So volumetric modular construction is where you put the whole of a house together and then just crane the whole building into place. There are a number of reasons that we haven't gone for that approach. One is the carbon footprint of the materials that we use, in that we want to maintain as low a carbon footprint as possible. And to go to a volumetric modular construction, all of our research and development has shown us that we have to put really large amounts of steel, both in transporting and into the modular construction, in order to be able to move it from point A to point B. And we don't think that's good for the planet. So we've gone away from it from that. Secondly, we don't think it gives us the flexibility in terms of house types that people want. And thirdly, in terms of being able to then move the product around, we can't get as good a thermal performance in the walls as we would want. And we think the approach that we have taken by using a closed panel timber frame gives us, one, the best possible low embodied carbon that we can achieve. Two, the most portable and adaptable system that we can use. But then by combining that, by putting in bathroom and kitchen pods, we built in the factory, and floor cassettes and roof cassettes, we essentially are putting all of the component parts of the house together in the factory and then craning into place, just not putting it into place in the factory. And we think that gives a better, more energy efficient, lower carbon house than we can achieve using the volumetric modular construction of panels. But other people will have different perspectives on that, and that's just our experience and our process that we've gone through, and the set of decisions that we have taken. I think there is space in the market for both, but certainly we've found transporting modular construction homes really restricts what we can do, and how we would join modulars together to make them work has been difficult with the amount of steel that we have to put into place. So that's why we've gone close panel timber frame, but other people will come up with different solutions. Does that answer the question, Thomas?
Yes. Actually, we are doing volumetric modular housing in the Netherlands, and I think we've solved some of the concerns that you raised. I would love to chat further if you'd like.
Very, very happy to have a further chat, Thomas. Yes, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We'd be very happy to have a chat. But yeah, it was about, for us, it was about the amount of steel we had to put in to use volumetric. It was about the end appearance of the house. It was about making it as portable as possible. The reason that we went with the closed panel timber frame and
also storage, right, in the factory.
Yeah.
Size of the factory required, and
yeah.
I saw one of the considerations that we had when going for either modular panels or modular volumetric was the connections needed on site between the different panels. That it would be quite hard to actually quality assure that all the connections are watertight and airtight.
We find that quite easy, I have to say. Pete, do you want to comment on how panels are joined on site?
Panel jointing is done.
Actually, that's probably not your bit, is it? That's probably an unfair question.
Very much, but I have a decent enough understanding. I think there's benefits to both.
Yeah.
It just depends on what you're trying to supply and the flexibility that you require within your supply. Now, we're currently supplying from small bungalows to 4-story apartments. And the flexibility to make and store those panels within the factory and keep as small a footprint as possible to drive the cost down and give us the flexibility on site leads us into a panelized system, as well as the carbon benefits. But then I also see the benefits of some of the modular, and there's definitely a benefit to both, and both have their own specific fit. For us, we've gone down the panel route. We started off with a very small factory with a very small footprint. It was the right thing to do to go panel, and now we've just expanded on that knowledge and expertise to take it to the next level.
And I think, and to be honest, I don't think you should see them as counterposed to each other, because in terms of the way we've evolved, whilst we build closed panel timber frames, we build pods for bathrooms and kitchens, for floor cassettes, for roof cassettes. And so essentially we're delivering everything that you would get in a volumetric modular construction, just using something that works for us, if you see what I mean. And in other places, the volumetric modular construction will work for another organisation.
Plus, we're only really dealing with building the superstructure elements, where the modular volumetric, you're doing all the internal fit out and everything as well as general. And it's whether we really want at this stage to tie those two together, where we really need the flexibility of what we're currently delivering.
Right. So that kind of feeds into there's a question about, do the closed panel panels incorporate any electrical and pipe work installation completed at the factory? But it's basically on site, isn't it?
Yes, that's all on site, unless it's within the bathroom or kitchen pods, and then they're fully plumbed out, and all the electrical M&E is all within them and fully tested within the factory before it leaves for site.
But we've skipped over a question, which is humidity issues with timber. Do you use sensors in the build? Many years ago, in the history of timber framed houses, there were problems with humidity, and the way that was overcome was by putting the vapor membrane. So if you remember the film, there was a vapor membrane on the inside and the outside. If people have got a posh coat for going out walking up hills, you've probably got a Gore-Tex coat, and that acts the same. It allows the moisture to go one way but not the other way, and that's what those vapor membranes do. And that's one of the big challenges that we have had with the Charm product is working out how we can insulate the timber panel and have that same effect using materials that aren't plastic. Is that a fair answer, Pete?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So using those vapor membranes, we don't need to put any sensors in to the actual house itself. It is a tried and tested and guaranteed route now. We've answered the do closed panels incorporate any electrical or pipe work installation completed at the factory? In the pods, yes. We put a kitchen and bathroom pod in, which is fully plumbed and wired up.
Multi-storey apartments, Pete referred to up to 4 stories. Info about butterfly and nailing machine. Pete, do you have any info about those bits of kit for Thomas? Or...
What sort of info?
Where can you get them from?
What's the name of the nailing machine again?
That's a Moby 1 frame making machine.
There you go.
We have 2 versions. We have one with a 10-meter bed and one with a 12-meter bed. So when we set up, we don't generally send panels out to site 12 meters long, although we have the capability. So we set the machine up once, but the CAD design will have drawn 2 or 3 panels for that particular house within that multi-wall, as we call it. So we're effectively making 3 walls in one go through the frame maker. The butterfly machine is just a form of turning the panel from one side to the other so that we can work on the other side. It's 2 flat tables that meet up in the middle and transfer the panel from the left to the right hand and lay it back down in the opposite orientation. And that allows us to put the insulation and the vapor control barriers on the reverse of the panel. It was because
when we opened that very first factory, we'd gone to Norway and we'd looked at how the Scandinavians did their production method, and they had a very long linear production line, and we hadn't got the space for a very long linear production line, and so we realised we had to find some way of flipping the panel in a space intensive way, and we came up with that butterfly table as a solution. Those butterfly tables are around from people that provide factory production line equipment. I think it's probably from the same people as we got the nail gun from, wasn't it, Pete?
Yeah, we currently purchase all of our equipment through a firm in Liverpool, J.J. Smith, who are specialists in woodworking machinery and that type of automation.
Great. There's a question about fire safety. So these...
keep going down the list, otherwise we'll get in a real confused. Apprenticeships is the next on my list.
All right, yeah, sorry. I went to the, yeah, go on, yeah.
Do you offer apprenticeships? Yes, I think is the answer to that, isn't it, Pete? When we devised the factory in the first place, the first factory was adjacent to a large public housing development, the Beechdale estate, and the vision was to house people from the Beechdale that had been long-term unemployed in the factory. That was largely successful, and there are still people in the factory that were employed in that way. And one of the other things that we found is with the training programs that we do, is that we don't pay as much for forklift drivers in the factory as they do in other places in the outside world. But we need to train people to be able to drive forklifts, and therefore one of our Fruefooter staff is acting as an informal forklift driver training centre, which was not something we intended intentionally, but we also offer apprenticeships as well in the factory, don't we, Pete?
Yes, we do offer apprenticeships within the factory, and it's something that we're really looking at expanding with the development of pods and the other lines that are going to join up with the panel line.
Yeah, and also we don't just offer factory floor apprenticeships, because a large amount of making a successful closed panel timber frame is in the technical drawing element, is in the design, and is in the design of those panels to fit the house type. And so we have technical apprenticeships as well as factory floor apprenticeships.
Correct.
Just the fire safety test one.
I'm done. There's something that was obviously a question.
Also, Bill asks whether, Bill Hartnett asks, is it always the planners that insist on brick slips? Do we try and talk to the planners? I'd say yes, we do try to talk to the planners, and it's often very difficult.
Talk to the members then.
Yes and yes.
It works in Reddit. We talk to the members.
So,
The opposites.
So, for example, a classic example of that is in Redditch itself, where the Edward Street and Britain Street developments, not the Charm development, have got brick slips on them because the planners wanted a Victorian industrial feel to the buildings, and that required a brick finish to achieve that. So yes, we do talk to the planners and try and convince them, and put up an argument around sustainability and around the carbon impact of the buildings that they have. But there seems to have been a bit of a regression in the last 2 years from UK planners away from cladding materials back towards a desire to see brick solutions, and that's why the factory has developed the brick slip capacity to try and address that, but minimise the carbon impact of brick in the process. Pete, would you want to add anything on the brick versus other cladding materials discussion? From the factory, I think you prefer a material other than brick to clad, wouldn't you?
Yes, definitely, but it just goes to show the environment that we're working in and reinforces why we use a panelised system to give us that flexibility of not only having the clad finishes coming direct from the factory, but also the more traditional product that we can put a brick skin around. And as we go into different areas of the country with different planning constraints or different ideas of what they want to see, that's really where we're getting a lot of our flexibility from with our current system.
The fire safety check is the next one from info at UFA Architecture in the Netherlands. Yes, we have fire safety checked our panels. We put them, we took them down to the research centre that we have in the UK. They turn the furnaces on. They are meant to achieve a 30-minute fire safety thing in that furnace. They turned the furnace off after 40 minutes, and there was only a small amount of charring on the outside cementitious board, and so it achieved the best pass that they possibly could have for fire safety. Yeah. Is there anything to add to that, Pete, really, around that? I mean, I think one that we've always said around fire safety is that people think that a timber frame house isn't going to be fire resistant. It is, and actually keeps its structural integrity longer than a brick built house, because brick built houses tend to fracture and collapse quite quickly in an intense fire, whereas timber burns in a different way, and therefore you get the structural integrity for a longer period of time in a timber house. And there are measures that we take within the construction of the frame to stop the fire getting anywhere near that internal timber anyway. And so that gives you that fire safety protection that you'd be looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, we have an independent fire report done prior to commencing each project, which will tell us the risk points, which will then guide us into whether we're using an OSB as a sheathing board or a fire board, different methods then through the construction in terms of whether we need to insulate some of the I-joists and stuff like that. And then that's all completed in the factory to match up to that fire report. And that's all fed in through the design.
And I think the other thing to say is in the virtually plastic free house, we have kept the intermittent strips around the windows and the doors where those gaps would be, because they expand to close the void, so there's no opportunity for the fire to spread up through the building. And also this construction method is only suitable for about we think in theory 6, but we've never gone above 4 stories. I think that's fair, isn't it, Pete? Around the timber frame. And
you've got the new regulations on the height of buildings that aren't inert material over a certain height, following Grenfell and all of that. So 4 is comfortable. within that boundary.
Four is where we're comfortable, and we've also, as a result of Grenfell, taken the policy decision. It's not a government regulatory decision to fit. What's the word?
Combustible.
Pardon?
Is it combustible material?
No. The thing that sprays water.
Sprinklers.
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 That was the word I was looking for. Sprinklers. We've taken the decision to fit sprinklers on any building above 3 stories, although there's not a regulatory requirement to us as an association. That's just a decision we've taken as an association to make sure that we've got the best possible fire safety protection in place. How do you avoid too repetitive tasks for workers? Pete, how do you avoid driving your workers to boredom?
All of my workers are trained on multiple tasks. When they start off, generally with no skill within our industry at all, they start off at a novice. They work through levels 1, 2 and 3 until they're able to train others. At that point, then we generally move them from that task. They've just spent 6 weeks getting up to the level 3, and they start another task after training up somebody else on the task that they're about to leave, so they prove their training. We then rotate people around all of the tasks. Also helps with the hand arm vibration from using any manual nail guns. So it's minimizing the impact and keeping everybody interested in the involvement throughout the process. And as the process changes and the people move around, we find that gives us a really good willing workforce. In my 2.5 years here, I've only known one person who's left. We've never had anyone leave. And all the people that we had at the first factory in Beechdale are still with us now.
Okay, thank you. What is the maximum output of standard house types for the factory? And are you producing many bungalow home types currently? The maximum output on one shift is 1,000 homes a year. Is that right, Pete?
20 per week, yeah.
And how many bungalow home types are we producing currently? How many bungalows have we got on the go at the moment?
We're not currently producing any bungalows, but we've recently completed a brick-clad one down in Northampton.
And I know we've done several bungalow developments over the last year or so. I think we've got 2 or 3 sort of standard house types for bungalows. We've got a 2-bedroom and a 1-bedroom bungalow, certainly, that we've built in the last little while in the factory, and I think we've got a couple of variations of how that bungalow is laid out at 2-bedroom standard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you increase capacity for the Midlands? The honest answer is, if we reach the point where we'd got a full order book for 1,000 homes a year in the factory, we could run a second shift. We could run a night shift, and then we'd be up to producing 2,000 homes for the Midlands. So yes, is the answer to that. Yes, Pete?
Yes, it is. Yep. That escalation of scale.
Yeah. Do you have any patent protections on designs products? Do we have any patent protections on designs and products? To be honest, we have what's more important than the intellectual property of the panels itself, which is a natural product which is difficult to protect intellectually, is the operating procedures of how we operate as a factory. And clearly, that's where we think the value is in terms of the knowledge and the intellectual expertise is not just the ability to how you put that factory together, how you put that panel together, which you saw, but how you can make it go through a factory in a safe and quality manner. And that's where we would protect our intellectual intelligence rather than on the makeup of the frame. That's right, isn't it, Pete?
Yes, definitely. It'd be more about that quality system that drives it.
Yeah, it's the quality system that drives it, where we would protect ourselves rather than in the intellectual property of how the frame is constituted, because it would be very easy to change 2 or 3 items in the makeup of that frame in order to get around any patent that we had. So when we looked into it, there was very little value in trying to protect the intellectual quality and the intellectual property in the frame, but the intellectual properties, how you build that, how you operate that butterfly machine safely, how you make sure you can put the designs into the gun to build the best frame properly and efficiently.
Okay. I think the next question is probably from Thomas again, just about automating and innovating. I guess there's been like the development of the different pod types, the brick slips. There's different things being innovated on, aren't there? You know.
Yeah, on moving to this factory, we was able to innovate in terms of not only having a longer line built, but also doubling up on the nail guns, so that would increase the speed of throughput and take more of the hand nailing away from the operators with the hand arm vibrations issues associated. Coming out of the small footprint, we was able to include an additional table in the middle between the actual frame manufacturer and the butterfly table, and that was just increasing the throughput of work. So we probably saved on, in rough terms, around 20 to 25% of the labour cost on that second line as what we would if we'd have still been making at Beachdale.
Great.
Okay, I think we
We're
have
at the end of questions for now.
questions in the chat. Well, if anybody wants to say anything, or if anybody wants to ask any questions rather than write them, you are very welcome to.
Yeah, I guess also, of course, we are designing this plastic-free panel, so that at some point that's going to be, you know, in the factory, and that will, you know, people are going to have to work out how to build that. So that's the that's the thing.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to say to all of our friends from Europe that are in the presentation is the other thing that has happened while we've been building the factory is that we've managed to crash the pound through a series of decisions that we've made as a country, and therefore we would be incredibly cheap as a supplier of timber frames to anywhere on the continent, because our pound is worth absolutely nothing, as we discover every time we go on holiday anywhere, if we were allowed to go on holiday with COVID. So if there is anybody on the continent that wants a really cheap deal, come and talk to us. If there are people in the UK, then we still think we offer very good value, but it would be more at the prices that you would expect, because you're used to the value of the pound, unlike people in Europe. I think that's the other thing we should say, really. I think we've got all of the questions asked. Is there anybody that would like to say anything?
Well, Carl, the only thing I would like to say, thank you very much for the presentation and the excellent way you answered to all the questions. Well, quite a lot of questions, actually. Yeah. So it was very good. Yes, it was a very good webinar. I have to leave now, but thank you very much. Good job. Great done.
Thank you. Good. We've had another question come in. Thank you ever so much, Ben, and good to see you. Will this change the way construction companies build homes for the future? Do you think other companies will use your methods? Well, I think other companies are. You know, we're not the only timber frame manufacturer. We're not the only volumetric manufacturer in the UK. There's been a explosion of companies building that. I always say about this is when my granddad started building cars in the car industry, he used to do lots and lots of different things, from stamping the metal in the factory to applying the gears at the Rover on very early Rover cars in the 1920s. That has all become robotised and personalised to the individual product. If you look at the construction industry in Britain, we still have people putting bits of mud in a fire and then gluing them together with other bits of mud in a muddy field. I think the construction industry needs to go through a similar transformation to what the car industry did between the time in which my grandfather was making cars and the time in which my father ceased making cars, when it was all done by robots and was cut to the size and and personalised to the individual person's desires. So I think the construction industry does need to move and does need to change. But having said that, there are a small number of very large construction companies that make lots and lots of money building the way they build at the moment, and there's no real incentive for them to change in the way that there were with cars once you've got Japanese cars coming in and disrupting the market in the UK. Do you think, and as I say, we're not the only we're not the only company that has got a timber frame factory in the West Midlands, let alone in the UK. So things are changing, but perhaps not quick enough.
Yeah, and also it's like the same as what we were saying with, you see a lot of buildings, a lot of homes that look like they're built out of brick, and they're not really. They just have brick over the top. So it's an aesthetic thing, but the actual construction is often timber, isn't it? So.
And the recording of this seminar, webinar, whatever it's called, will be publicly available on the EFL website. Peter is going to put it on. It will be on late next week, is it, when we think they're going on, Tom? Or is Peter here? Peter could answer that probably. Yes, late next week. Okay, because that was another question we got asked.
You're right, Carl. It will be published on the Tom YouTube channel. And I will send you the link right now. I don't know if I have it. I will send it by chat.
Yeah, that would be great, because it was somebody in the chat that has asked the question privately if the recording will be available for this webinar. Do I think the change might become incentivised by the government? I think it is the honest answer. If you look at the current prospectus that the Homes England have issued for the latest round of the affordable housing programme, the grant subsidy to build affordable housing in the UK, that is currently out at this very moment, you will see that there is a large section on modern methods of construction where they are trying to incentivise a change in the construction industry to exactly these sorts of methods. Okay. Anybody's welcome to ask a question by voice or by chat.
Yeah, could I ask a question, please? It relates to cost. Cost is a dominant factor for people buying houses, particularly younger people, as you'll be well aware. It's very, very difficult in the UK now for people under 35. And there isn't any doubt that my group would like to really bring the price down. Now we're hoping to get a gift site. With a gift site and with your methodology, I can see us being able to have rentals which would be certainly not more than the costing of 35% of gross income. And I do think this is something that the whole country needs to see, that younger people are going to be able to get into housing, get an opportunity to save. So although you're pressing all this on the green agenda, which is fair enough, I do think it also needs to be pressed hard now on the cost agenda. And this will really put the frighteners up the building industry. And it's following from your comments. So we will certainly be looking at, if we can get this, we can get free sites, free land, because we're the sort of organisation we are, and we're talking to councils about this now. Our top target will be low cost, high quality, but building in the sustainability. And by and large, we'll sell the project on low cost for young people. Now, we think that would become a big winner across the country and really put the frighteners on the building industry.
Yes, I wouldn't disagree with what you've said. The 35% gross income affordability figure was a standard figure probably 30 years ago when I first entered housing as what was considered affordable housing. And I know some of the work that was done in the development of mutual home ownership schemes in the UK use that income figure, that percentage figure of income as part of their affordability calculation. Persimmon Homes made an average of £65,000 on every house that they sold in the last 12 months. So you can see the artificially inflated value of homes in the construction process from that statistic alone. If we can work out ways of taking £65,000 out of the construction process by removing surplus profit, but also if we can then go beyond that £65,000 by putting in efficiencies in the way that homes are built, we start to get homes that are genuinely affordable for everyone. And whilst we've been talking, by the very fact that we have this agenda around charm, around virtually plastic-free houses, about its ecological credentials, predominantly today, about its environmental performance, we think there are other big drivers around why you would want to use this as a construction method. We have talked about the quality that we achieve there, and one of the realities that we've got is if you go and look at any building site, and there's one about 200 yards from my house at the moment, you will see that the age of brickworkers in the UK makes me look young. And if it makes me look young, then it clearly isn't sustainable in the long term to have that sort of age profile of skilled workers working on sites. And so there is a skills shortage in our construction industry in the UK that's quite intense. And by building using the factory in this way, we begin to overcome that skills shortage because people can operate in a controlled environment, in an environment that can make sure that quality is there and that those things are there. I've also talked about the fact that people have to work in all sorts of environments, and we also think as a responsible employer, we need to try and put people in the best working conditions possible. And it is clearly better to work in the factory in a decent temperature than to work on a January morning in the cold, wet, icy British weather conditions. And so there's also one about better working conditions for people there. And I think Pete also talked about the flexibility of the product that we've got in terms of being able to address that. Is there anything else you'd want to say on that skills stuff, Pete?
No, really, I think you've summarised it well. There's definitely a shortage of the traditional skills within the building industry. They're starting to really feel the pinch on that now, and getting the apprenticeships through is not easy. Within the factory environment and the control we have, and I think you mentioned it earlier, where our goal at the start of setting up local homes was to employ local people, making local homes for local people. And we purposely took people who were the furthest away from the job market and trained them up. Only about 50% of those people made it through the training in order to operate the way we wanted them to, with the consistency and the quality. Those people are still with us now, and they're the people that have trained everybody else up that's come within to the factory against standard ops risk assessment. It's a skill level that they've reached, that they'll always have. It's easily transferable to others, and we're able to double our workforce in a matter of 2 to 3 months. From pressing the trigger, I could have both lines running and get up to 1,000 homes. And that's because we've got the processes and the repeatability to do that, where you can't do that on an individual skill basis on a building site working the traditional way.
Okay, anyone else?
I've got a question, Carl. Hopefully it's okay. It's slightly political. The government's white paper on planning, it's all about build more houses. Clearly, this is a good way of building more houses, eco houses, safe houses, low carbon houses. So I'm not sure if the government have looked at this, or they're aware of this, or if Accord, Charm, whoever have actually responded to that consultation, saying if you want good, high quality eco housing, this is one of your solutions. I know we've spoken to ministers in the past, but I'm not sure if this new government is aware of it, or if we're trying to push the very few number of organisations and companies that have got factories like LoCal. We've said several times there's more than one factory in the UK, but there aren't hundreds of factories in the UK turning these out. Clearly, top of the tree is LoCal, really good products, but there's an opportunity for more and more. It follow on from what you're saying about all the age profile of the people actually on site with muddy boots and putting things together, as opposed to the modern methods of manufacture. So what's the thinking nationally in the government about spreading this method of manufacture, well, maybe across Europe and in the UK?
I certainly can't speak for across Europe, I'm afraid. I wouldn't know if there is a European-wide view on these sorts of issues, and maybe some of our friends from the Netherlands who are still in the chat could answer what the view is in the Netherlands. In terms of the UK, I think there has been sort of cross-party support for modernising the construction industry for a while now. But there are only sort of 5 or 6 major house builders in the UK that are responsible for the vast majority of the output, and they tend to be resistant to regulatory change. So, for example, they were resistant to drives around driving down the energy performance of houses a few years ago, and so. What I think the government is taking a position of trying to nudge the industry towards modern methods of construction. Yes, we have a continued ongoing dialogue with government to try and encourage that agenda. Yes, we try and promote modern methods of construction in every way possible. Yes, that seems to be a welcome reception from government in terms of, if you look at the latest prospectus from the government around the Affordable Homes Programme, it's clearly endorsed there, and organisations will have to take that forward more seriously going forward from this funding round. And also the latest iteration of building regs is pushing the construction industry to a level of energy efficiency which will make it difficult to continue building using traditional build. Not impossible, but difficult. And therefore you can see government trying to push the construction industry towards more modern methods of construction in that way as well. But I certainly can't speak for the British government, let alone the European government, in terms of what their overall perspective and view.
Oh, yes, you can. You should be able to. What about our friends in Europe? I'd like to know if they got any indication what happens across Europe.
What's the situation in the Netherlands at the moment? I know there are some people from the Netherlands. Is there a big drive towards modern methods of construction in the Netherlands, or have you already achieved that? I mean, of course, in Scandinavia, they've been using what we call modern methods of construction for several hundred years now. So in Scandinavia, it's the normal way to build. And I think in areas of France, that's also the same. I think the German and the Dutch construction industries have been more like ours traditionally. I don't know if there is somebody from Holland that wants to talk on that. Maybe Thomas, if Thomas is around, or someone else.
Yes, maybe I can tell something about the situation in the Netherlands. Although I'm not from the construction industry, there is a lot of things going on because of the climate agreement of Paris, of course, which makes us go to less carbon neutrality in 2050. We also tried to get all the houses from natural gas, so it has to be replaced by, for example, electricity, and the electricity has to be climate neutral as well, so made by wind or solar energy. And I think the industry is working hard on it, as well as EFL, as a network in the European housing industry. Not sure if we are going to reach all the goals by 2050, but we are doing our best. And most of the social housing companies in the Netherlands, such as Woonbedrijf, Eindhoven, one of the partners of Charm, is doing their best to become circular or energy neutral by 2050. But still, yeah, we have 30 years to go, but this will be hard, I think, to be as such become energy of CO2, carbon neutral.
Yeah, great. I think also the point we're trying to make as well is like whatever we build now has to be ready to be carbon neutral in 30 years' time, when it should still be there as well, which is a very important point.
And also the renovation stock, because in the Netherlands the housing stock is quite old. For example, the older cities in the Netherlands, Amsterdam, Leiden, etc., they have buildings built in 1700, 1800 something. And to renovate those houses and get them into the level of becoming CO2 neutral, it will be very difficult. Although we try, of course.
We're gonna make it.
We're gonna make it.
And there are several opportunities, possibilities for, of course, to getting carbon neutral. It's not just electricity. So I think with all the other solutions, it is possible also for the old buildings. But it's quite a big challenge, but possible.
That's a fantastic image you've got behind you, Margette.
I'm not sure who built it though.
It's not one of ours, I have to say, because it's higher than we would do with our timber frame. But it is a fantastic image, and we've got wonderful images like that of people's houses being craned over their heads. And that
nice. You can send me one. I'll use that for a background next time.
Great. Also, Joris, maybe you know about what's happening in Belgium, if you're there, if he's there. Maybe he's not. He might have gone away. Because Joris has been working on retrofit, and they've retrofitted that office, so it's completely circular, and there's a lot of bio-based stuff. But maybe he's not around now.
I could add a bit.
Yeah.
If you can hear me. So we're working with Sustainer Homes, and that's I think we've been live for 5 years now. From a very small company startup, we've built our own first modular home 5 years ago, and we've grown a lot since. But we've especially recently, over the last year and 2 years, also developing terraced housing concepts for the social market. We find a lot of attention from many big parties, so there's definitely a sort of a shift going on in the Netherlands. Also in terms of the attention that goes to building with wood instead of concrete or bricks. So I do see a positive change, and also people looking for really concrete solutions instead of just talking. So I'm quite positive.
Not concrete solutions.
No, not concrete solutions. So timber frame solutions, definitely. Our wood also comes from Finland. It's I don't know. It's great.
Yeah, slower growing stuff. Yeah.
I think we have lost Joris by the sounds of it. So
yeah, I think we have, unfortunately.
There's also a question from Lucy asking what funding concerns do you have? Clearly, in terms of the factory itself, the factory relies on the construction program of Accord Housing Association, but also on sales to external customers. Accord Housing has got a sustainable development program of about 400 units a year at the moment, and we're looking to increase that. So I don't think there is any danger in terms of the factory's core customer being at the association itself. So I think it's got a guaranteed customer there. So I don't think there's an immediate funding concern at all in that way. We obviously also have external customers, and they will be largely dependent on the housing market, and that goes in cyclical ups and downs. And so I suppose those external customers, the supply to them will be in ups and downs as well, in peaks and troughs. and that's something that we would anticipate taking place. As the association itself, we're relatively well financed. There are no immediate funding concerns in that way whatsoever. Having said that, we're not immune completely to the outside world. So the ability to do projects like this, we've relied upon European funding to do things like the virtually plastic-free project. Clearly, that won't be something that's available to us as an association going forward. The British government are saying they're going to launch a prosperity fund to enable us to do things like this, but the details of that have not been announced yet, and it's not been announced, and whether it will be as a result of what's happened with COVID is a question that's open for only the future will tell us the answer to that question. So we don't have funding concerns around the factory and around that, but we perhaps do have funding concerns about being able to fund the great innovation of doing things like virtually plastic-free houses going forward.
Can I ask, has the Worcestershire Local Enterprise Partnership given you any support?
No.
Okay, well, all I will tell you at this stage is if we can get this land that I'm talking about, we've already had discussions with them and they're quite keen, I think, to plug in. And all I will tell you is we will come and talk to you then, I'm hoping, with them with us from a regional perspective, in this case, a Worcestershire perspective, to see if we can pull government money in for you and for us. So I've got it in mind. I've talked to the chief executive. He knows what we're doing, how our thinking is going. So I just point that out to you, that we will try to get some money out of them. And I can see your way of proceeding in factory building is without a doubt the way forward for the construction industry. But there are, as you said, so many vested interests with hands in their pockets that it's got to be driven forward pretty ruthlessly if we're going to win on this. But you're going in, it's fantastic what you're doing. Congratulations.
Okay, I think we might be at an appropriate point to finish, unless anybody else has got something they want to contribute in the next little bit. Okay, can I thank everyone for their time, for their interest, for their questions, for their support, and for being here, not just in this individual session, but in the sessions that we've had across the week. It's the first time we've tried one of these inspiration days, let alone trying to do an inspiration day virtually, which we turned into a week in Inspiration Week. We've sort of short bullets each day of the week. I hope it works. If you've got any feedback in terms of how we can make that better, please email us separately with that information. But thank you for your time. I hope you found the whole week enjoyable, interesting and stimulating. We tried to put the programme together to make it thought-provoking and interesting, but also to give a flavour of what we're doing in Charm in the West Midlands as the UK inspiration point around circular housing. And hopefully we've achieved that, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us. I think the next Charm series of inspirations is actually a Belgian inspiration, and it will be in February time coming up. So we will try and make sure that anybody that registered for this event gets information around the Belgian inspiration events that will be coming up in February.
It might be in Wunderdrijft, and it might be yeah, it's Wunderdrijft. So it's Eindhoven.
It's Wunderdrijft. So it's actually a Dutch inspiration thing. I'm sure we haven't yet had the conversation about how that will work and what framework that will be, but I suspect it will have to have a virtual element to it still because of COVID in February, and so there'll be a chance to join virtually if there's not a chance to join in the real world. We do, of course, have a lot of support in putting these things on from TU Delft, from EFL, and our British partners in the Birmingham University and SHAP. And so a big thank you for all of your work in making that happen.
And thank you, Carl, and thank you, Tom, and thank you, Peter, as well, for your expertise. We ought to congratulate you and thank you as well for making it all happen today. such a lot of wealth of information you've given us.
Pleasure, pleasure.
Yeah,
So on that note, I think we've said all of the thank yous. I don't think there were any more outlets in Eindhoven in the Netherlands yet. In the next Inspiration Days will be in Eindhoven in the Netherlands in February, and it will be looking at circular and modular homes again. The program
so that last week in February, I think they're aiming for. Yeah. Almost Belgium. Yeah, thanks Sophie for the organisation as well, with the emails and everything, and doing the Eventbrite, and also Rebecca for the film that we showed earlier. So yeah, great. So should we stop there, and we'll stop recording, and this video will be up online soon.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.